All in Sports Network. We love sports.
It is Saturday, October 19th. It is about 10:46 p.m., and this is our immediate reaction to the Texas Longhorn loss, first loss of the season to the Georgia Bulldogs in Austin. 30-15 was the final. You are listening to All in Horns, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. Jake, the feeling is pretty glum. It's not going to be a fun episode for a lot of fans. Unless you're a Georgia fan, you're probably tuning in just to see the misery because y'all are a bunch of perverts. Jake, how are you feeling?
Mixed, just kind of sad about how bad that first half was from the offense. Happy with the fight they showed in the second half. I mean, you want to win the game, and they certainly gave themselves a chance to come back and win that game. But at the end, they just put themselves in too big of a hole. You can't put yourselves in a hole like that against a team like Georgia. Georgia, I thought, played their best game of the season. It's a tough loss, but it's a 12-team playoff, and there is some positive things coming out of it, even though it is the first loss of the season.
Yeah, Texas played by far. They played the first half like they had played in the glimpses that we were concerned about throughout the first 6 games of the season. There were stretches against Mississippi State. There were stretches against UL Monroe. There were stretches against Oklahoma that caused for concern that we said multiple times on this podcast. If you play like that against Georgia, you will lose. You will get your ass beat. And that's exactly what happened because they came out and played that way. Offensive line, I'd never seen what has been touted as the best offensive line in college football play that poorly over the last 2 seasons. I mean, this is probably one of the worst performances I've seen since maybe the Oklahoma State game a couple of years ago, where Quinn, I believe, was a first-year starter, and it was just, penalties out the butt, and Quinn couldn't hit the side of a barnyard 20 yards out. I mean, he missed open throws. The throw that sticks out to me was the Ryan Wingo throw in the second half, and down by 15, a chance to, if he hits that in stride, it's a touchdown. Quinn Wisner or Trey Wisner drop in the first quarter on that one of the opening drives that probably was going to go for at least 30, 40 yards from about 45 yards out, if not a touchdown, is a big one that jumps out to me. Just missed opportunities. And then anytime you had a 3rd down and 5, 3rd down and 4, or a 4th and manageable play, you get a false start and you set the team back 5 more yards and make it a 3rd and 9. The amount of times that happened, countless times, horrible. Kelvin Banks played a bad game. Never thought I'd say that. Cam Williams played a terrible game. Never thought I'd say that. DJ Campbell got benched for Cole Hudson. That's how bad he played. Quinn Ewers was scared and hesitant, and it was frustrating to watch a player be that rattled by that much pressure from the defensive line, and we're seeing ghosts. Just had nothing going his way at really any point aside from the start of the third quarter when you could get some scripted plays and a little bit of an adjustment at halftime. The offense came out, looked better, but still that was the best that Quinn looked all game long. And then Georgia and Kirby Smart made the adjustments. Georgia played Texas's scheme better than Texas did. Kirby Smart came out and out-schemed, out-game planned, and the players came out and out-executed the Texas Longhorns tonight.
Yeah, and I do agree that Kirby Smart had the edge early in that game, but also there was people open. But when you're under pressure, and there's been a lot of discussion. If you go on my Twitter feed, you're going to see a lot of discussion about Quinn Ewers and the offensive line, and I'm blaming both. The offensive line was horrible tonight. That was Kelvin Banks' worst game of his career. I've never seen him play like that. He got beat multiple times. Also, Quinn Ewers, go back and watch the Michigan game. He stepped up in the pocket. He had some pocket presence. He showed things we hadn't seen to this point that since he has come back from this injury is gone. Mm-hmm. It is gone. He doesn't step into throws because guess what? When you're getting blitzed and they're bringing more than you can block, like on that throw to Wingo on the 4th down where it was underthrown and it would have been a first down if he just threw it correctly or Wingo somehow kept his balance, you know you're going to get hit. You can't throw off your back foot. You have to just step into the throw and take a shot. And what's frustrating is we've seen Arch Manning do that. And I'm not saying that this means Arch should be the starter moving forward, but this has been a constant theme in Quinn's career. He doesn't throw the deep ball well because even when the pocket's clean, he doesn't step into a pass enough. And then when he's under pressure, it's even more of throwing off the back foot. And his pocket presence, it looked like he regressed back to last year at times, and especially his first year, where he had happy feet. He left the pocket several times before he should have. There was a handful of times at the least where he could have stepped up and had plenty of time to throw. And then when he goes on the run, it's just terrible. And he had several throws that just were thrown straight to Georgia defenders that they didn't catch.
Oh, dude,
well.
he could have easily had 3-4 interceptions
in this game.
Yeah, no, I 100%
so
agree.
Two things can be true. The offensive line had a very disappointing game, and they did not play good, and they got beat consistently. But also, Quinn Ewers is in his 3rd year. This is a guy who wants to be the first overall pick. He wants to go to New York and be in the Heisman. You got to step up and take a hit and make a throw. He played scared all night long, and that's what bothers me the most is he looks scared. And you can say, well, the O-line didn't play well. He was under pressure. He's in his 3rd year. Those excuses are gone.
Yeah, that and call some audibles, make some adjustments at the line, keep Gunnar Helm in, or keep a running back in to help protect, or whatever you have to do. I don't know if you need to max protect or what you have to do as a quarterback, or have some design rollout passes. I know Sark was trying to do some of those things with his play calling in general. I saw some of those things happening. I know we saw Quinn try to roll out a couple. There was a time last year, Jake, where Quinn Ewers, Texas fans were nicknaming him Quinn Young or Vince Ewers. There was a point in time where this guy was running and scrambling, using his feet, extending the play. Why have we not seen that from Quinn at all this year? It's almost as though he just lost all athletic ability or all ability to even run with the ball in his hands. And to your point, hesitant, scared, second guessing himself, just looks razzled and he looks just uncomfortable at all times, whether that be going through his progressions, sticking with one read, identifying and predetermining what the play is going to be and what the defense is going to run at him. And then whenever they change it up mid-play, like the interception to where he was targeting DeAndre Moore, they showed man coverage. They left Gunnar Helm wide open going down the sideline. You mentioned that to me during the broadcast. He decided to stay with his first read, goes with it. They stay in the cover 2 short zone, and they pick it off. You stop predetermining where you're going to go pre-snap. Adjust and see. Make your reads. Go through your progressions. Stay calm in the pocket, but he seems so rushed. And yes, I know that goes to the pressure of the offensive line. Yes, both things can be true, but man, that watching a quarterback play with no confidence and as though he's just completely lost out there is so frustrating, especially coming from a 3-year senior, or excuse me, a 3-year starter, where those sorts of things should not be happening with the type of experience and the type of knowledge that Quinn should have within this offense and seeing the defenses that he has throughout his entire career.
This was a game where Quinn could have picked the team up and carried them to a win, and he would have been right back in the Heisman conversation, and he failed. The offensive line failed him, but he failed the team as well. And we said it last week. He did not look right against Oklahoma. We said if he played like that, it would not look good against Georgia. He played like that again. I mean, his performance from Oklahoma just carried over. They beat Oklahoma 34-3, but Sark had to really limit the playbook in that game because Quinn could not throw it past 10 yards. And that happened again in this game. And let's not forget, the deep ball has been an issue Quinn's whole career, and that is because he does not step into throws. In my opinion, that's why his deep ball isn't good, because the few deep balls he's had that have been good have been when he steps into it. But he just very rarely steps into a throw, and especially on deep balls, he just kind of throws his foot to the side and just flings it.
He relies solely on his arm talent.
And there was plenty of throws this game where he had time, and it was a deep ball, and it was ugly. And then, like you mentioned, the throw to Wingo, he had time. He threw it off his back foot. He could have stepped into that throw. That could have been a touchdown. You just can't have that. Margins are so thin in these games against other top programs. And when your quarterback plays like that, and the shame of this is we'll get into the defense and Carson Beck, but I would have never imagined Texas would have lost this game with how Carson Beck played. Maybe I could have said, yeah, if Quinn plays really bad, but I thought he would rebound and play like the Quinn we had seen for most of last year for the most part. And then all this early on in the season this year. But he just hasn't looked the same. And if he doesn't get better, it's going to be interesting to see what Sarkisian does. I obviously he pulled Quinn in this game, and I'm not sure how you felt about that decision completely, but I agreed with it. Quinn, it was terrible. I mean, he couldn't do anything. And Arch came in, and it wasn't much of a spark. They did move the ball a little bit better with him. But then I agreed with him putting Quinn back in. Arch didn't prepare to be the starter this week. It's just probably not a good idea to roll with the whole game. But him pulling Quinn at least appeared to calm him down for at least a couple possessions where he could play somewhat competent football.
It was a message to Quinn, is what it was. Saying, look, dude, just chill out. This is your team. Calm down. Take a breath. See from the sideline, see what the defense is doing, back up, take a step back, zoom out a little bit, see what the defense is presenting you. Because there was a play to Golden that Arch Manning completely missed on a third down, and he decided to go deep again, and it was incomplete, threw it into double coverage, and he had Golden seeming wide open over the middle of the field, missed him. Then, start of the third quarter, Quinn, they get that exact same look, the exact same play. Quinn hits Golden in stride, and they get it. It sets it up for the Isaiah Bond touchdown.
Was that Quinn's only good throw of the game? Maybe the blue touchdown too? I mean, he had like two impressive throws in this game, and saying one of them is to a wide open guy in a clean pocket.
Yeah. And Jake, if I had told you that Carson Beck went 24 of 41, 175 yards, 0 touchdowns, throw 3 interceptions, and then the defense only allowed 1 scoring drive over 35 yards. Well, what would have if I had told you that was guaranteed to happen, what would have you predicted the score to be?
Probably around 34, 37 to 10.
Yeah.
At best, if not more.
Yeah, I probably would have said, oh, if you're going to guarantee that, that's a 45-7 win for Texas.
Yeah. And that's what's disappointing is, our whole lead up to this game was kind of, we're going to find out if the defense is legit. Well, ironically enough, we figured out the defense is legit. This defense is legit. They struggled a little bit against the run at times, but they did shore that up in the second half. And bottom line is they got stops. They had one possession where Georgia actually crossed the 50-yard line and scored, and yet Georgia had 30 points. This offense is going to be kicked. The offensive line, Quinn Ewers, and even some of the receiver, and Gunnar Helm, who did not have a good game. He couldn't block a soul tonight. Are going to be kicking themselves because they lost this football team this game. They got beat in the special teams phase, and they got beat with their offense. And that is what cost Texas this game at the end of the day. And that's what's so disappointing is this is really the first time I can think of year one. There's probably a game or two.
Yeah.
But I don't even really think about year one anymore. But this is really the first time in the Sarkisian era where it's like the offense just lost them a game, just flat out lost them a game.
Yeah, I go back to that Oklahoma State game, and I think that was year 2 of Sark, I believe.
And maybe I think the defense still kind of sucked in that game.
and you're probably not wrong. But the defense forced 3 turnovers, still lost the turnover battle. And to your point on special teams, Jake, the punting gap between Texas and Georgia, a huge advantage in terms of flipping the field. Georgia seemed as though they had Texas within the 10-yard line. And that doesn't help whenever the same guy continually gets holding penalties. Robertson. I'd never even heard of the guy before on this roster, 24, until tonight. And in a bad way, has 2 holding penalties that pushes Texas back within their own 10-yard line to start a drive after 2 really good returns. And so, yeah, special teams played a huge factor in this game as well. That Texas lost.
Yeah. And not being able to, by the way, I just looked it up real quick. Yeah. The defense gave up 535 yards in that Oklahoma State game. I was just curious.
Okay.
But no, and also I think the trust is really shaken on Bert Auburn right now. And I bet he's not looking good in practice. Cause from what I've read, he has not been looking good in pregame warmups for most of the games this year. And there was a point in that third quarter where they could have kicked a field goal to cut it to, I believe, 9. And instead went for it, and it would have been around that 45 plus yard range, and off the right hash where Auburn has especially struggled from. And so I think Sarkisian probably wanted to kick a field goal there, but he probably thought there was a higher probability of converting the first down than getting the actual field goal made. Which also brings me to, that was probably his worst play call of the whole night, was that third down play where they just did a run play to Wisner, and we're kind of planning on going for it on fourth, but I don't mind running it on a 3rd and 6 situation in certain spots where you're planning on going for it. But against Georgia, that's not the team I'm going to do that against. Even if the run game was looking better to start that second half. But it's like you said, we'd seen blemishes for this Texas team this year. And mainly on the offensive end, we just thought the defense hadn't played anyone yet. Well, now the defense has played someone, and the secondary is legit. We have a legit secondary, folks, and that's great. But it doesn't matter if your offense is going to look that bad, and from 2 position groups where I think the expectations are the highest. With this offensive line and with Kelvin Banks struggling, that just tells you all you need to know, because he's never looked bad and he has gone against plenty of incredible competition. And then Quinn Ewers in his 3rd year has not looked the same since the injury. You just got to call it what it is. This is 2 weeks in a row where he has hindered the offense, and the offensive line assisted a lot in that tonight. But if you're a Longhorn fan, you can't make excuses for Quinn or the offensive line, because you got to expect more from both, because they're both experienced and they're both what you thought were proven at this point. And a lot of players, other than probably Banks, really, really hurt their draft stock tonight.
Well, Jake, and I think too, and you might disagree with me on this, and that's perfectly fine. If you do, we can have a discussion about it. But I thought the run defense was a concern. We talk about the elite defense, and I do think maybe it was just circumstantial. Me personally, I think if Georgia stuck with the run and gave Trevor Etienne 30 carries in this game, it would have never been close. I think they would have dominated time of possession. I think they would have been able to go down the field with ease, multiple drives. But for whatever reason, they continued to throw the ball with Carson Beck and these short completions. And when the strength of the Texas defense was in the secondary, and they played very well, and I would say the secondary dominated the wide receivers in the passing game for the Texas Longhorns. Really one of the few position groups and battles on the field that Texas absolutely controlled was in that secondary against Georgia's wide receivers and Carson Beck. But I thought, especially in the first half, for whatever reason, with the big lead that Georgia had, should have kept running the ball. And it seemed like Etienne was getting at least 6-7 yards a pop. Did finish the game with 19 carries, 87 yards. That's good for 4.6 yards per carry. Had a long of 18. He did have 3 touchdowns. Those were all short yardage touchdowns. But he carried the load. And I thought only having 19 carries did Trevor Etienne a disservice. Probably should have had 10 more carries. In my own opinion, I think Georgia would have been able to control the ball game a lot more than they already did. And that would be my one concern for this Texas defense. Now, like you mentioned earlier, second half, they looked a little bit better. I would argue to counter that is that they knew Georgia was going to try to take the air out of the ball and run the ball a little bit more, and it makes it a little bit more predictable. You can sell out on the run knowing you need to stop that.
So you just actually explained why I disagree with your statement that they should have just kept running it. Because once they tried to focus in on the run, it didn't work. So if they tried focusing on the run earlier, what changes? Why does it magically work for an extended period of time? They ran it much more in the second half than they did in the first. In the first, they were averaging around 8 or 9 yards a carry with Etienne. And then as soon as they focused on trying to run the ball more, and Texas adjusted somewhat on defense just by not playing the box so light, because they were playing the box very light, trying to help in coverage. The passing game still didn't work for Georgia, and then the running game didn't work for them. They got stopped on multiple short yardage situations in the second half. Yes, the run defense wasn't great in the first half, but as soon as Texas adjusted, they didn't run the ball well. And if Georgia would have just started running the ball earlier, I think their offense would have looked the same exact way it did, which was like an offense that had one scoring drive over 35 yards, an offense that essentially did nothing to earn this win because they also turned the ball over a lot. They didn't take care of the ball. They didn't run the ball that well in a lot of scenarios where they needed to. Their quarterback was terrible. And there was pressure in this game, not as much as I would have liked from the Texas defense. But when your tackles are allowed to pull a guy's jersey off it, that does certainly help. I wish the Texas tackles would have took some notes from that and started doing that as well, because on the big third down conversion on that scoring drive they had, there was an egregious hold that stopped a sack from happening.
Jake, the officials were in question really the majority of that game. There was a huge controversy that I believe ended up being the right call. Not even sure if the referees were allowed to go about it the way that they did. But it did come on the Jahdae Barron second interception with the offensive pass interference, but they called it on the defense. It was a pass, or then it was an interception returned, and then they just said no penalty. And after Texas Longhorn fans threw about 100 water bottles, including some beer bottles and cans out there on the field, Sark had to go out there, stop the student section from doing that. They decided to then reverse the call and say the interception was good. There's no penalty. Let's just continue playing some football. I'm not entirely sure if the officials can go back after that long of a time and then rechange it. Did the crowd have an influence on their decision? And they looked up at the scoreboard and saw the video, the replay, and was like, you know what? That was a terrible call on us. We're going to make this right here, give them the interception. Because had that not been an interception, we would have never known, because that could have potentially changed the game dramatically at that point in the game. Obviously, the end result did not change the outcome of the game, but just what happened there?
Well, first off, we're gonna need a statement from the SEC as far as how the overturn going to happen faster, but the crowd just delayed it happening, and so then that made it feel so delayed because they had to wait for the fans to stop throwing stuff. Which also, don't throw stuff. We're not Texas Tech. I know it maybe ended up helping us, and that is why I get people's problem with that. Is it kind of sends the wrong message. Don't throw stuff on the field. But at the end of the day, this to me is why is there not replay review on penalties on like a turnover play? Have some type of rule for that situation where a turnover happens, a penalty's called. Go back and review it. We saw it cost South Carolina against LSU earlier this year on like 3 penalties that took away 3 different turnovers, or maybe it was 2, but I know it was at least 2 in that game. That changed that game. South Carolina probably wins if not for the officials in that game. Mm-hmm. And it was an egregious call. The call was more egregious than the trash throwing. And I find the trash throwing pretty egregious.
Yeah, no, the call on the field was awful. Defensive holding on Jahdae Barron was the receiver goes into Jahdae and pushes him. It doesn't even look at the quarterback. It doesn't even look at the throw. At no point did the receiver turn around and was expecting to throw to him. Jahdae just kind of went with the push, freed himself up, and put himself in position to make the play and got the interception. So Jahdae didn't even put himself in a position or make contact with the wide receiver. So the fact that it was ever on the defense in the first place was wrong. They got the call right at the end of the day. And I've always said that. I've always said, look, as long as you get the call right on the field, on the court, on whatever, on the ice, wherever you want to call a call for an official, as long as it's right, then I'm okay with it. The process in which they went about it, though, was very strange and very suspect, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in a game because the call was a Big 12 type call. I mean, that's one of those calls that's so bad on such a big play where you go, is this game fixed?
Yeah.
Because it was so egregious. But then they got it right. But like you said, probably not about the right way. But again, when there's a turnover play or a touchdown play, something like that, I feel like it'd be pretty easy to have in a rules that you can replay review a penalty, because that was terrible, and it shouldn't have taken the whole ordeal that happened for that to get called the correct way. But that was another one of the how about Jade Barron tonight? I mean,
Yeah.
his draft stock's through the roof because he's played the star position and he was very good at that. He probably would have been drafted in the mid rounds last year, came back because he wanted to play corner. And him and the corners are very good on this team. Georgia had a very difficult time getting anything going in the passing game. Yes, there were some open receivers here and there, but that's going to happen when you're playing a good passing attack. And other than maybe the Kentucky game, which was early in the season, and Georgia, I know, was missing some guys that were playing tonight, that was the worst the Georgia offense has looked this year by far. And so I think there are positives to come out of the night. Maybe we should end the show on some positives, because there's obviously been a lot of negativity with it being the first loss.
Before we do that, and yes, we will end the show with some positives, but before we do that, a slight injury news with Andrew Makumba getting injured at the safety position. That could be detrimental with Derek Williams already out for the season. We'll stay up to date on any updates that we get on the Makumba injury. And then also Trey Wisner, Jake, went down at the end of the game. Texas very thin at safety, very thin at running back. Those were the two positions we could not afford to lose. Two of the number one players at those positions currently went down in this game. Lasting effects for the team and how it could affect it, Jake.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of weird because Texas hasn't had many injuries, but they have been very targeted at the position pools, and that's rough. Safety is now going to get to a point where you start to have thinking about playing true freshman Xavier Filsaime some. And that's not something I think they want to do this year. I think they want him to grow a little bit, learn the system. Safety is a really hard position to play as a true freshman. And so it's concerning moving forward. And Makuba did walk off on his own accord, and so that is hopefully a good sign. We'll let you guys know any news that we see next week, as hopefully some of the news about these injuries comes out. And Wisner, I'm not really sure what happened. I just read that he had gone back to the locker room late in the fourth quarter. And obviously that leaves you essentially Jaden Blue and Jarrett Gibson. And yep. I think Gibson has been banged up too. Blue obviously got banged up earlier in the year. So you're pretty much sitting at a point where you are down to one running back with actual experience, which is wild considering how deep this running back room was going into fall camp.
And you would include a Ryan Niblett if Wisner.
He's a position change, which
right?
Is
yeah,
crazy.
That's what I'm saying, though. Like, to what you were saying was going into the season at running back, Niblett changed from wide receiver to running back because of the injuries that had already been accumulating at the position. And that's where we find ourselves with Ryan Niblett. So, Jake, real quickly, we don't have a lot of time, but we have enough time to end this thing out on a somewhat positive note. I'll take the lead on this one. The season is not over, folks. There's a lot of season left. That's the joy of playing in a 12-team playoff now. You know, even last year, we thought the sky was falling after losing to Oklahoma. Texas still made the playoffs with one loss, and still won their conference with one loss. Texas' hopes for the SEC is not over. Texas's hopes for the season, definitely not over. Chance to make the playoffs, still fairly high. There are about, I want to look back at the SEC standings. I want to say there's 6 teams that are sitting at 6-1, and a lot of those teams still have to yet to play each other. Texas still controls their own destiny. Texas wins out, and they still have to play the team that is sitting atop the standings in Texas A&M at Texas A&M to finish the season off, and gets a win there and finish the season on a win streak going in. It would make the SEC championship game if that was the scenario. So Texas still fully in control of their own destiny. You had losses with Alabama tonight. LSU going to be playing Texas A&M next week. So, Jake, there's still a lot to be optimistic for It sucks. It feels like shit tonight that the Texas Longhorns lost. However, the season still very much in front of them.
Yeah, I'm going to say a couple things on it. I know we're going to go a little longer than the 30 minutes we try to stick to, but if Texas had gotten their asses kicked in the second half too, I would not be saying there's positives coming out of this. But they showed fight. I think they just got punched in the mouth in the first half. I think Georgia was by far and away the best team they've played. Georgia got healthy coming into this game, and Georgia played their best football. Georgia hasn't looked the same this year, but Georgia gets up for big games, and they didn't in the first half against Alabama, and then they came storming back in that game, and then this is their first big game since then. And Kirby Smart backed up against the wall, a Georgia team backed up against the wall, is scary. And that showed in that first half. And Texas was not ready for the level of physicality that Georgia brought. That said, they didn't lay down. This was a one-possession ball game after the third quarter.
Yeah,
that's a lot of Texas fight. Georgia averaged 4 yards per play. Four yards per play in this game. And I trust Sarkisian to figure out the offense because, quite frankly, Sarkisian's offense has never looked as bad as it did tonight. And I trust them to get the offensive line right. The offensive line, I trust the bigger sample size that we've seen from this offensive line over the last 2 years than I do one game where they play bad. I trust the bigger sample size of Sarkisian being extremely successful as an offensive coach than I do one bad game against Georgia. And at the end of the day, I think the defense proved themselves today. And I'm very excited to watch this defense moving forward. And I have trust that the offense will figure it out. Whether that will be with Quinn Ewers at quarterback, we will see. He is going to have to play better. You cannot have a QB who cannot throw it past 20 yards downfield and doesn't have any pocket presence whatsoever. And I don't know if it's because of the injury. It certainly would seem that way because he was looking fantastic before the injury, and he has looked like a completely different player since he has come back from the injury, including against Oklahoma. But I trust this offense to figure out. I think the defense has proven they are legit, and I'm excited to watch them. In every game in front of them, that's their hardest game of the schedule. Let's get a rematch against Georgia. Play them in the SEC title, come out more prepared, play a better first half. And Texas very easily could have won this game. At the end of the day, they lost by 2 scores in a game where Texas did not play football in the first half on the offensive side of the ball, and then came out and played better in the second half. I think this team would have a great shot to beat Georgia in a rematch. But they got to earn that now, and they got to not drop another loss. I think if they drop another loss, their playoff chances go down, but they're going to be favored in every single game the rest of the season.
Just a big shout out to the Georgia Bulldogs as well that did show up and play. Jalen Walker, 8 tackles, 8 solo tackles, 3 sacks, 3 tackles for loss, and then Michael Williams coming back from the injury as well. 3 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. They were in the backfield. Those 2 edge rushers dominated the tackles tonight for Texas, and they deserved the win that they got tonight. And I'm not taking anything away from Georgia. They earned every bit of it. They look like the better team. They came out. They executed the game plan that Kirby Smart put ahead of them and prepared well for what Sarkisian threw at them. All the misdirections and all the counter plays that Sark likes to run to force the defense. They stayed disciplined. They trusted their eyes. And, they didn't get fooled by it. And Kirby Smart had this team prepared. This is a very good Georgia Bulldog team, Jake. I think people forget that because I mentioned it before the game even kicked off on Twitter. I sent out a tweet or X. I sent out a post that people have lost the significance of just winning in college football. And it's now all about how you win. Just winning football games is important. And that's exactly what this Georgia Bulldog team has done this season. And now they're getting healthy, and they just played their best game on prime time against the number 1 team in the country on the road in a conference game. Watch out for the Georgia Bulldogs, ladies and gentlemen. They're legit. They're for real. And like you said, Jake, Texas very well could have another opportunity of facing them in the SEC championship. And then, hey, even maybe a third time in the playoffs.
Yeah, this could be the first of 3 matchups. And folks, you're not beating Georgia 3 times in one season. Texas got punched in the mouth. They responded. I expect this team to come out next week and play some great football.
And if you're Georgia, you're not beating Texas 3 times in one season either.
No.
So
No.
That is going to do it for our show tonight. A lot of things to look forward to. Texas will prepare for the Vanderbilt Commodores on the road against Pavia. And hey, this is a much improved Vanderbilt team. Maybe this is the game Texas need to get their ass beat to prove that they're not as good as they think they are before going into what could be a trap game against Vanderbilt on the road this week. I think we're going to see a very highly motivated Texas team on the road. Very excited for the upcoming week against Vanderbilt. Jake, any last words?
Still hook 'em. Some of you guys need to chill, man. I had to unfollow a few people tonight. When I see a fire Sark tweet, get fired off.
Fired
yeah, it's just an unfollow. So chill out. It's 12-team playoff. Neither one of us picked Texas to go undefeated, by the way. It was a very disappointing first half. It was a much better second half. And this Texas team will learn and they will get better. And hopefully the injuries won't be too significant. That'll be something we're following closely.
Well, that's going to do it for today's episode and our immediate reaction to the Texas Longhorn Georgia Bulldog loss. Again, Texas Longhorns fall 30-15 in primetime. And they moved to 6-1 on the season, 2-1 in conference play. And we will prepare for the Vanderbilt Commodores coming up next week right here on All In Horns, your daily fix for all things Texas Longhorns, brought to you by Rogue Sports Network. For Jacob Jimerson, I'm Tanner Carlson. Again, as always, and forever, welcome.
All in Sports Network. We love sports.